To order. Aloha and welcome back, commissioners. At this time, I would like to call the September 27th, 2021 meeting of the Oahu Real Property Tax Advisory Commission to order. Pursuant to the emergency proclamation issued by Governor David Ige on August 5th, 2021, relating to the COVID-19 response, in order to allow public participation in a manner consistent with social distancing practices, the following procedures are in effect for the meeting. Members of the public will not be allowed into the meeting room, but may view the meeting on a live broadcast via the WebEx internet platform or via recording once available on the Commission's website. Remote testimony will be accepted on all items from persons registered to speak by video conference or by phone following opening remarks and administrative announcements. If you would like to present oral testimony remotely, please register through the WebEx internet platform. Written testimonies, including the testifier's address, email address, and phone number, will be available to the public on the Commission's website. As a courtesy, please turn off all cell phones for the duration of the meeting. Commission Aide George White, would you please call the roll to confirm the attendance of commissioners at this meeting and the presence of a quorum? Are you on mute? Can you hear me?
He's muted, I think.
Yeah, hey George, I think you're muted. You can hear me, right, Jack?
Yes, I can hear you good. Yeah.
Commissioner, there you go. Yeah, thanks. Commissioner Pham, can you hear me? Yep. And I see Commissioner Peters there as well. Commissioner Bean, how are you? Sorry, we got started a little early.
Sorry about that. I had some trouble logging on.
No problem. I think we're having technical difficulties. We're not hearing Commission Aide White.
Okay.
So Commissioner Bean, for you, I just read the usual stuff at the beginning of the meeting about public testimony remotely, and we're just waiting for Commission Aide White's audio to call the roll.
Got it. Thank you so much.
Commissioner Peters, can you hear us? Oh, we can't hear you.
Cannot hear him either.
Yeah. So it appears that Chambers, we cannot hear Council Chambers.
Can you hear us now?
Yes.
Test, test.
Yes, we can hear you now.
Okay, thank you. Commissioners, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. My apologies, Chair. Let me take the roll. Commissioner or Chair Mould, you're present. Vice Chair
Present.
Wong is excused. Commissioner Bean, present online. Commissioner Legal, present online. Commissioner Peters,
Here.
present in person. Commissioner Pham, present online. And Commissioner Stormo Gibson, present in person. Chair, you have a quorum.
Mahalo, Mr. White. Given the presence of a quorum, let us continue on with our agenda and the business of the commission. For those commissioners participating from outside of the council chamber, under the governor's proclamation, the meeting will automatically recess if we lose audiovisual contact with you and cannot reconvene until we establish contact. Therefore, please announce beforehand if you will be voluntarily signing out of the meeting. Members, before you are the minutes of our September 7th, 2021 meeting, which supplement the video recording of that meeting available on the Commission's website. Is there a motion to approve the minutes of the September 7th, 2021 meeting?
I move to approve the September 7 meeting of the commission.
Is there a second?
Second.
Absent objection, was there a second? Is affirmative?
There was a second.
Thank you.
Commissioner Peters.
Thank you very much. Absent objection to this motion, do we have unanimous consent to approve said minutes?
Yes.
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 With unanimous consent, so ordered. Before continuing with the commission's business, we will now proceed to the remote testifiers. To those coming in remotely, please video conference from a quiet location and mute your television. Also, be sure that your microphones and cameras are in working order. For those joining us by phone, we will identify you by your phone prefix. If technical issues arise, I will give you a few moments to try to resolve minor connection issues. However, if it cannot be resolved, I will have to move on to the next testifier. When I call your name, please state your full name and the agenda item or items you are testifying on. Speakers are limited to a 1-minute presentation on each item. When the timer goes off, please conclude your remarks promptly. I will close testimony once all remote speakers have testified. Without a list in front of me, Commission Aide White, do you have a list of testifiers in front of you?
Yes, Chair Mould. We do have 3 individuals that I'm confirming. Ms. Iwasa will be first. There's another individual with the name Myla who will confirm whether or not she is testifying, as well as Ms. Stephanie Sakamoto. But first up will be Ms. Iwasa.
Thank you.
Thank you. This is Natalie Iwasa, and I apologize. I don't have a camera. My son is distance learning today, and he's got the camera. I would like to testify on several items. First of all, under 1C classification and rates, it's you list that you're going to be asking for or potentially asking for a land value tax study. And when you discuss this, I would ask that you take a look at discuss what that entails and how much that will cost. With respect to valuations, residential A exemptions, I took a look at some of the information on that classification, and at the last meeting, the administrator said that most of those were historical homes, but there are actually a lot of nonprofit organizations that also have exemptions on residential A properties. So my question is, or actually my suggestion is that somebody review these exemptions annually. And what is the process for approving the exemption? I think it's really important for us to understand that, is it just approving the application that comes in, assuming that it fits into one of those groups that are in the ordinance, or do they go beyond that? And the reason I say this is important is because I found a property at 3228 Harding Avenue that is just a home. And it is owned by a private school religious organization, but it's hard to tell whether they're actually using it for services or if somebody just lives there. With respect to items 2, 3, and 4, the committees, according to the resolution 17-112 that established this, the Real Property Tax Advisory Commission, the committee meetings are supposed to be agendized and able to accept public testimony. And I haven't received a single committee agenda, even though I asked for one. And I have not seen committee reports. So I would ask going forward that agendas be included in the commission's or the committee's website, and that any committee reports be linked to agendas so that the public has easy access to them. With respect to item number 4, subcommittee credits and exemptions, you're apparently going to be discussing vacant residential properties. I guess this is a continuation from the last meeting. And I have serious concerns, as I mentioned the last time, but as you discuss this, I think it's really important to understand how many of those properties would potentially even be long-term housing, because some are vacant because they're up for sale or between renters. Some are maybe vacant for renovation purposes. Some are even uninhabitable. So I think it's important to get a breakdown of those properties. On the charitable nonprofit exemptions, section 8-10.10, I did provide details on that the last time, but I wanted to let you know that, we really need to look at this carefully. And I found a couple of properties as examples of why this is important. Property 1311 at Hoftailing Street was assessed $4.6 million. It's a commercial property, but they only pay $300 a year. And this property would normally be paying over $57,000 this year. I forget if this was a union or a business league, but it's not a charitable organization. Another one was 1065 Oahu Street, where they're assessed $3 million, and their tax would typically be about $37,000, but they're only paying $300. So, this exemption 8-10.10 costs taxpayers a lot of money every single year. So please recommend that be changed. And then with respect to your discussion on the prior recommendations, if I recall correctly, the administrator said during the last meeting that they had put up information on the website about valuations and how they do that. That was a recommendation the 2019 commission had made, and I was on that commission. I looked at the Wayback Machine and nothing has changed. So I guess you need to take things with a grain of salt when you hear certain information. So I look forward to today's meeting, and thank you for allowing me to testify.
Thank you very much, Ms. Iwasa.
And Chair, do you wish to see whether any commissioners have any questions for Ms. Iwasa?
Yeah, I just have a clarification, Ms. Iwasa. Thank you so much for coming and doing this testimony. On this charitable purposes, charitable is the property that you found, are they vacant or are they occupied? What is the activity in that building?
Oh, the Hoftailing and Oahu Street?
Yeah, is there any activity in there, or what is it occupied for a meeting, whatever, or just vacant, or what's going on with those buildings?
Okay, I gave 3 properties as examples. Which one are you asking about?
The one that you said like looks like a union or something like that,
Oh, right. No, it's not vacant.
So somebody is using it or for meetings, or is that like to occupy, or?
Okay, so they call it a charitable exemption, but it applies to business leagues, it applies to labor unions, it applies to a whole range of nonprofits that are not actually charitable. So that's why I'm asking for, I've asked in the past for the city council to change that and merely put in a definition that says that that exemption just should only apply to 501c3 organizations. And then all of these other ones, labor unions and business leagues and whatever else, would either have to find another way to get an exemption or they would have to pay the regular tax.
Okay, thank you for the clarification. Thank you so much.
Sure, you're welcome.
Commissioners, are there any further questions for Ms. Iwasa? Commissioner Stormo Gibson has raised her hand.
Yes, thank you for testifying, Ms. Iwasa. I'm curious about your point on the valuations. Just for clarification, what exactly would you be wanting to see on the website that's not there currently?
I haven't looked at it now for a few weeks, but as I recall, it was basically information so that the taxpayer could understand how their properties are being valued, because there are two methods and there's a lot of confusion, I think, between when somebody gets an assessed value and it's increased like 20 or 25%, you know, and they don't understand why it was increased so much. So it's just information on how the city goes about valuating all of our properties.
So not necessarily for each property, but just their general description of their method.
Right, it was regarding the process.
Okay, okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Methodology of the appraising the property, yeah. Ms. Iwasa, just another question, I think, or clarification anyway. Do you have anything about this land value tax? You mentioned that just to look at it more closely. Do you have any information or any knowledge about this land value tax?
No, it was on your agenda, and so I'm not sure exactly what you folks have in mind.
It is something that we brought up in our committee, so I just thought that if you have any comment on that, specific comment, yeah.
No.
Okay, thanks.
You're welcome.
Any other commissioners with questions for this
Chair, I
testifier?
have a question, not for our testifier, but regarding something that our testifier raised about subcommittee meetings. As it was explained at our first commission meeting, that the subcommittees are not subject to the same rules as these commission meetings. Could Commission A. George White explain this to us?
That is correct.
That is correct. The subcommittee, our understanding is that the subcommittees do not have an obligation to agendize and announce their meetings, and they are not under sunshine laws. Can you confirm that, Commission Aide White?
That is correct. The resolutions creating the Oahu Real Property Tax Advisory Commission have the council asking for the ORPTAC to observe sunshine to the best of their ability. However, they are not a board or commission governed by the sunshine law. So we do agendize formal commission meetings. However, meetings of the subcommittees in past practice as well as currently, we do not agendize those meetings. They are not required to under law. The effort to provide reports and summaries of what is discussed in the subcommittee meetings is an effort similar to what is requested by the council to observe sunshine principles. That is why any meetings of these subcommittees is discussed at the next subsequent full council meeting.
Thank you for that clarification. You know, I think just, this is Chair Mold. I think, you know, if a subcommittee wants to invite folks, are they allowed to invite testifiers or other, you know, participants to their subcommittee meeting?
Yes, Chair Mold. The subcommittee meetings are completely at the discretion of the subcommittee members. They can invite whomever they wish. However, they are not necessarily open to the public unless the subcommittee wishes to make that available or make that option available. It is strictly a meeting of the committee members, and then they are essentially discussing what was discussed at the next full commission meeting.
Thank you for that clarification.
Any further questions for testifier Iwasa?
This is Commissioner Bean. I have a question for Ms. Iwasa, please. Ms. Iwasa, I was wondering, and I have not spoken with anybody else on the committee, but if we were interested in having you come to one of our subcommittee meetings to go over some of the past recommendations and how your group viewed it as being applied to the websites, etc., would you be willing to come down?
Yes, I certainly would. I was actually chair of the evaluation committee for 2019, so I'd be happy to do that, assuming that it fits in my schedule.
Absolutely. Okay, great. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
So if there needs to be any, this is Chair Mold, if there needs to be any communications, would that go through Commission Aide White? So do we have Ms. Iwasa's information from her testimony and from her registration?
Yes, Chair, most definitely. We are able to reach out to Ms. Iwasa, and if any subcommittee members or subcommittees wish to reach her, I can provide that information directly. And I'm not necessary to be a conduit. The subcommittees can reach out to her directly, but I'm happy to reach out to her for scheduling purposes if there are dates and times that I can help facilitate for everybody to come together.
Thank you for that. Commissioners, any other questions for testifier Iwasa? Hearing none, can we move on to the next testifier on the list, please?
Yes, Chair, we are reaching out to a testifier identified as M-A-I-L-A, Myla. Is Myla wishing to testify or just monitor the meeting?
Hello, yes, I'm just here to observe.
Thank you, Myla. I will go ahead and mute you again, but thank you for being present and observing the meeting. Next individual, potential testifier, Ms. Stephanie Sakamoto, if you can confirm whether or not you are wishing to testify or just observing.
Hi, I'm Stephanie Sakamoto on behalf of the Hawaii Credit Union League. We'll just be observing today. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Sakamoto. Chair Mould, there is two other individuals. Let me confirm with them. One individual, Mr. Dennis Tanimoto. Mr. Tanimoto, if you can confirm whether you are wishing to testify or are just observing the meeting.
Just observing, thank you.
And Chair, I don't know whether that was heard, but Mr. Tanimoto indicated that he was just observing. Thank you, Mr. Tanimoto. And lastly, Ms. Ordonio, I believe you may just be observing, but if you can just confirm that, whether you are just observing the meeting or wishing to participate.
Just observing.
Thank you, Ms. Ordonio. And Chair Mould, let me just confirm. Chair Mould, that is all attendees and all individuals that were logged in to testify, so there are no further testifiers for this meeting.
There being no other testifiers, testimony is now closed. I believe at this time.
Mr. Chair, just ask Commissioner Aide George, who is Janelle Denny?
Commissioner Legal, Miss Denny is a staff member of Budget Chair Say's office. So on our calls, at least this meeting, I have gone ahead and moved any council staff into the panelist box just for convenience. But Miss Denny is a council staff member under Budget Chair Say's office. And I believe there are a couple other, I don't see them online right now, but sometimes members from the Real Property Assessment Division as well as other council members' offices do sign on. But Ms. Denny is with Council Budget Chair Say's office.
Thank you. No
Thank
further
you.
question, Mr. Chair.
Okay, I believe at this time there may be updates from some of our subcommittees. Commissioner Pham, on behalf of the Classifications and Rates Subcommittee, would you care to share with us an update?
Thank you, Chair. We did not have any subcommittee meetings between September 7th and now. Instead, we're working off of the deliverables we presented at the last meeting with that full report of topics that were discussed when we did meet. But we, excuse me, we are ready to start seeking some actions from the commission. So the first item I put up to you for the agenda was a discussion or determination on what's going to constitute a recommendation. Is that unanimous consent? Is that majority of quorum, or is that majority of commission? This recommendation meaning what goes into our report that is due in December.
So I'm trying to pull that up right now to take a look at it. Is that what is posted publicly now on our site that Commission Aide White shared?
Yes, on the agenda.
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh, it's on the agenda.
So
right?
I'm also unsure, and maybe Commissioner White can enlighten us on if there is a particular rule that we need to be following as commission regarding putting out recommendations into that report.
Yes, Commissioner Pham, just to clarify, your query is as to the formal report or reports that the commission may submit to the council?
Yes.
Any recommendations that would be, I guess, steered by the chair and as the commission as a body as a whole, it would be a majority of the members. There is no need for unanimous consent or unanimity. There are certain rules we can refer to should there be disagreement amongst the commissioners, but the report from the commission would be a report that represents a majority of the recommendations of the majority of the commission. Should there be minority recommendations, a separate report that could be appended or included within the majority report would be available. But in past practice, our understanding is that the recommendations that are included within the report do not require unanimity, just the majority of the members of the commission.
Thank you.
And then Commissioner Pham, I see on here number 2, I found your list, a recommendation to reorganize Bill 20 and Bill 31. Are you able to describe that recommendation a little bit more in this forum, or?
Yes. So
Great.
that was included in our, first, I just want to make sure no one else had anything to add on the, what constitutes a recommendation, but I think our commission aide has clarified that for us. So the recommendation from the committee is to reorganize the pending legislation bills 20 and 31, so that Bill 20 will be solely about the tiering structure of the residential A classification, and Bill 31 would be strictly about what classification or what properties and characteristics of properties would qualify that property to be classified as residential A. So I suppose that this would be a motion. So I move to recommend that Bill 20 be bills 20 and 31 be amended or reorganized in their writing to reflect that Bill 20 is regarding the tiering structure and Bill 31 is regarding the characteristics that qualify a property.
I second.
So to clarify the motion, Commissioner Pham, as a matter of procedure, it is understood amongst the commissioners that the commission itself does not have the jurisdiction or authority to amend any bill, but the recommendation of the commissioners on your subcommittee is to make a motion to discuss and make a recommendation that those two bills be amended in a more clear manner such that the issues are separated and clarified between those two bills. So it's a recommendation to amend, not necessarily to amend the bills themselves.
Yes.
Correct. It is a motion to have the commission make this recommendation.
Yeah.
Understood. And that motion has been seconded.
I think as Commissioner Pham has explained, I think it makes it more clear the difference between the two bills. The reorganization probably is not the right word, but it's just the proper naming and description of these different bills. I think it'll make it more clear, clarity to each bill.
This is Chair Mold. May I ask a question of the subcommittee members? Have you spoken with any council members or council staff about that recommendation?
No, we haven't. I haven't. I don't know about Pham or Peter Aki, but I haven't spoken with any of the council members. Yeah.
So I mean, I wouldn't. I mean, I'm open to considering that. I mean, I think it sounds like it makes sense on its face. It sounds like a very sensible move on its face from my standpoint. I would want to see the potential bills in their new format before making a decision. I would want to see the actual language that you would be recommending for each of those bills. I mean, is it just like a cut and replace of language from one bill to another and vice versa?
That is exactly a cut and replace. So to fill in a little bit more here, in our report for the last meeting, we wrote in that there were two issues that these bills were bringing up. One was the tiering structure, and one was classifying which properties go into that classification. And it seemed that they were both trying to do something to residential A, and we felt that it would be better to think about them as one whole bill or to think about them topically. And that this is a recommendation that helps us as a commission just talk about tiering structure for one, and then separately talk about who qualifies into that classification. So the Bill 20 is the one that is most affected by the tiering and shifting that from the $1 million net taxable value cutoff up to a 1.3. And Bill 31 is talking about including country preservation 1 and preservation 2 zoned properties into residential A. However, Bill 20 also had the wording such that properties with up to 2 units would classify as residential A, being changed to 3 units. But we felt that that was something that was more appropriately discussed as part of Bill 31. So it's just moving that one bit from 20 to 31, and then that way we can better discuss as a commission the tiering structure and make a recommendation on whether the tiering structure should be expanded and what the cutoff should be. followed by a separate recommendation on which properties should be classified into residential A, whether they be by zoning or by quantity of single family dwelling units.
Yeah, that sounds sensible. This is Chair Mold. I am looking for Commission Aide White. It looks like, did they drop off? Did the main line drop off? Oh, they're there, yeah.
Sure.
So, Commission Aide White, may I ask a question? In the past, when something like this has happened where we've, in the meeting, discussed what would be included in our recommendation, or if we were to do an interim recommendation, did we decide upon it in this type of quorum, or did we have, is there have you provided language for this change already? Have I just not seen it for review?
As far as a change to
those bills, but as far as amended language to those bills to achieve the change that the subcommittee would like to recommend?
Yeah, no, there's been no drafting of change language or whatnot. That would have to come from the chair of the council or individual council member to request it. I think as far as the procedure for the committee itself, these types of motions can be made by any commissioner, but what it would reflect is simply a red flag or a highlight, a flag on the issues to make sure that it makes it into the final or interim report, but that recommendation is already been agreed to. It puts it off the table of things to discuss. It could always be brought back, but if the commission were to approve the motion, then Commissioner Pham would then have that bullet point stocked away for when we are drafting the report. The report would then be reviewed and would make sure that that bullet point, if the commission were to approve this motion, is included in the report. Does that make sense?
That makes sense. Thank you.
And we can go further or deeper or wider, including drafting of those measures. It shouldn't be hard to do, but that request would have to come through a council member, and we could discuss that further. But as far as the motion on the table right now, I believe it is just for the commission to come to an agreement or not at this point, whether or not they agree to essentially streamline both bills so that they talk about one topic each, and whether or not the commission's in agreement with that principle or not.
And I'd like to remind folks that Council Chair Waters did give us a green light to provide interim recommendations. So if this is something that we would like to make an interim earlier recommendation on to assist the council in reviewing those bills, because those bills are currently up, right, and potentially being heard and scheduled for hearings, then we have the option to do that as well. Is that correct, Commissioner Aide White?
Yes.
So are there any further questions or queries of the subcommittee members, Commissioner Pham, or any of the subcommittee members on this issue before we move, decide on
Mr. Chair, Mr. Chair, just a clarification then. Do we also need to vote whether we have to put that on the interim report or the final report, or it doesn't really matter?
The vote today is just a matter of essentially acknowledging the commission's position as far as what report it appears in. That will come for a separate vote for you all to decide whether it's an interim report or a final report. All that is happening as far as the motion made today is, from my understanding, and Commissioner Pham can correct me if I'm wrong, but the motion is just to get a consensus among the commissioners. And if that consensus is reached, then that matter can be basically put in the bucket of this is going in a report at some point, which will subsequently be approved by the commission.
Okay, that was my point. Thank you so much. Thanks.
So
I
would think
one thing to add.
Sure.
Okay, thank you. So the the written report that we provided at the last meeting did specify exactly what the recommendation is, right down to stating it as Section 2I1 from Bill 20 be added to Bill 31, and to strike that from Bill 20. So that wording has been presented to the commission.
Great.
Commissioner Stormo Gibson.
Yeah, just as relates to the definition of residential A, what properties qualify as that? We had a discussion in our subcommittee about if it's equitable to have a dividing line that is so stark where if you're over 1 million, you're in this bucket, and if you're under 1 million, you're completely out of the bucket. And if that's really an equitable approach. So we can bring that up more during our report, but it seems that it would make sense if we're going to comment on defining residential A, it would fit in that recommendation. Or we should discuss that as well, I guess is what I'm saying.
So I think that we could still discuss that element of the definition of Res A and it's now partitioned from, it's partitioned from sort of, I guess the first one is the level of Res A, and the second one, and where that level is, and the second one is what goes in Res A. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct.
Are there any other questions from commissioners? All right, are there any, so I guess we should move to decision on this. I mean, I'm wondering if we're ready to make this decision. This is Chair Mold. I definitely think, I mean, again, from my standpoint, it sounds like it makes a lot of sense, but in sort of the timing of, I think we can have this discussion in a partitioned matter about our recommendations, but I don't know if we necessarily need to have to move to decide upon making that recommendation just yet. I mean, I think it's a good recommendation. Is I think, I think there probably needs to be a little bit more discussion and understanding from council about why the authors of the bill, like why they authored them that way and what stage they're in. Would we be able to maybe conduct some of that? Would the subcommittee be willing to conduct a little bit of more research on those questions and find out if there are some other reasons why the bills might be structured the way they are? Would you all be willing to do that?
I think, Mr. Chair, I think this motion, if it's approved, is going to go to the council anyway, and because they have the final say. So by that time, probably Chair Waters would say, "Well, we do this because." So I think we're just bringing it to the awareness of the council, and it's up to them to make that decision. If it's no good because it runs contrary to their reasoning why they have this, then they'll say no. They just continue doing what they're doing now. But we're just bringing it up and say, okay, this is what we found out, and eventually or ultimately, it's really their decision whether they're going to change it or not. So I think I don't think it's necessary to be asking them now for that reason, because it's going to go to them anyway. That's just my thought. So as I listen to Commissioner Aide George White, so.
And my understanding, is this a bind? Are we binding ourselves to making this recommendation in our final report?
No, again, as Commissioner Legal highlighted and our discussion has highlighted, this is strictly a kind of a go-ahead from the commission whereby if the commission is in agreement that these two bills should be considered to be amended in some fashion to be clearer, then there are various avenues that can be communicated to the council that the commission believes this. If they're in agreement with it, they can simply request a revision or an amendment to those drafts. And it's not necessarily official. The only thing that is official is when you all are voting for interim reports or final reports. Those matters then become official. There's always room to reconsider any action by the commission. But in this case, again, this just appears to be just a point of clarification for the commission members and for the commission as a whole to say, this is what we believe right now. And if there's a consensus among the commission, then further communication can be done with the council to discuss whether or not those two separate bills could be easily redrafted to not add or replace matters at this point, though that conversation may continue further as the commission discusses this further. But currently, I believe Commissioner Pham's recommendation is simply a cut and replace of different sections from each bill to make them cleaner and clearer, not necessarily to be adding new material at this point.
Thank you, Commissioner White. Are there any objections to the movement, to the motion? Hearing no objections, I move to approve.
Thank you.
The motion is approved, correct?
Correct.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair. May I move on, Chair?
Please, thank you, Commissioner Pham.
Thank you. So the next issue underneath the Classification Rates Committee is the notion of a potential land value tax study. There was a land value tax study that was circulated with the meeting materials for today, done in another municipality. It was done through a university, and they actually simulated the effects of a land value tax. So this study is something that we can look to as we discuss and see what kind of objectives that study had and what kind of issues it brought to light. And maybe that will help us in our discussion as a commission to point out specific objectives. And if we were to make a recommendation for a land value tax study, this is something that we can easily reference and start outlining for ourselves as a commission. So what I would request is that we delegate some tasks out to our subcommittees so that the policy subcommittee as well as the classification and rates subcommittee can both be flipping through that study from the other municipality and coming up with a list of things that if we were to seek such a study for the city and county of Honolulu, what we would want that study to reveal. So that has been presented to the commission.
Thank you, Commissioner Pham. That was very enlightening and a very, very interesting report. I appreciate that. So the request, so if I can kind of define, the request is to have the policy committee and the rates and classification committee take a further look at it and determine sort of, you know, how we might include it in our recommendation for council and actually framing out sort of further research on considering a land value tax type of format.
Yes. And I will also add that we had a testifier today, Ms. Iwasa, who mentioned that it would be beneficial to this commission to look at the cost of such a recommendation. So that's also something that looking at this study, we may be able to backtrack and reveal, perhaps through contacting some of the people who are listed in that study.
Thanks, Commissioner Pham.
Mr. Chair, Commissioner Pham, I may be wrong. Did we also recommend that the budget and fiscal services take a look at it?
Hey, Commissioner Legal, we do have that's next. The order of your outline for your report was reordered, so that's coming up next after consideration of the land value tax.
All right, thanks.
Yeah. So is there a move to take on this approach to study a land value tax for the policy and classifications and rates subcommittees more closely?
So moved.
Second.
Hearing no objections, Hearing no objections, the motion is adopted. The policy and the rates and classification subcommittees will take a further look and collaborate in coming up with a recommendation related to a study of the land value tax. Okay, Commissioner Pham.
Thank you. And the final issue that was raised at the last meeting, we talked about making sure that we use the time of Administrator Takara and the staff efficiently as to not overwhelm them with data requests. So there was a written list of data requests that was circulated with today's meeting materials. There are 11 requests, and this is not an exhaustive list, but this is all inspired by our written report from the last meeting. And it's specifying exactly the quantities of properties that we want to know about according to whether they're 1 unit or 2 unit, they have homeowners exemptions, and what their valuations are. Because as we've been directing our attention to bills 20 and 31 regarding residential A, there are 10 requests in particular that would enlighten the commission, that would at least tell us the quantity of properties that fall under the current set of rules versus the proposed set of rules as those bills currently are drafted. So that would be the justification for the requests. Chair, do you want me to state all of those? It's a lengthy list.
I don't think there's a need to have the commissioners had an opportunity to review the questions from the Rates and Classifications Committee.
Commissioner Stormo Gibson.
It seems that a lot of these questions are trying to ascertain the impact of the bill that would increase Res A threshold from 1 to 1.3 million. Is that right?
That's correct.
And then also the change in the zoning of, so basically changes to the Res A definition and what the impact would be.
Yes.
Okay. I mean, that makes sense. And maybe we had some questions that came out of the policy committee meeting that also had to do with Res A. So maybe those would be added on.
I think for the sake of sort of efficiency, maybe we can come up with a list of questions from maybe the policy committee can come up with a list of questions and as a follow-up to this set of questions, because I think this set of questions will be really useful to us to look at, how, what's actually out there and the numbers and values that are actually out there.
Okay. I mean, I think, yeah. Well, we can.
You have. I mean, you have.
It's similar line of questions in terms of, but it's for all the properties under $1 million, right? whereas this focuses on the 1 to 1.3 differential.
Do you have a question you would like to, Commissioner Stormo Gibson, would you like to pose a question right now to be added to the list?
Yeah, it was similar to what came up at the last commission meeting. I think it was actually brought up by Commissioner Peters, which was for all those properties that are not Res A, right? How many are because they're under a million? How many is it because of the zoning? How many of it is because of, there was a third reason. Oh, because there's 2 or more parcels or 2 or more units on the parcel, right? So it's kind of similar to this line of questions. It's just wondering for those under a million, what is the reason, or for which reason are they exempted?
And Chair, if I may briefly just interject, with regards to Commissioner Pham's motion regarding the 11 questions that he's submitted and shared with the commission, I believe Commissioner Stormo Gibson's query may touch upon kind of, are these the only questions we're going to do, or can we jump on and have some other questions? And as far as process is concerned, I want to reiterate that each commissioner or each subcommittee can proceed with asking questions however they wish to. I believe Commissioner Pham's effort was to streamline it and make sure that the commissioners agreed with the questions, but I also believe that Commissioner Stormo Gibson or any other commissioner can tack on questions or additional queries, and we can, potentially build upon this one document if these 11 questions are approved by the commission based on his motion. We can build upon that without any issue, but also any commissioner can formulate and push other angles of inquiry without having council or commission approval to do so.
I'd like to add something. So I haven't formally stated a motion yet, and the list that was presented did imply that questions could be tacked on right now if that's what we wanted to discuss as a commission. And one more thing, there is a data request in there, request 11, that does not pertain to residential A. It pertains to vacant residential property tax, and that request is to inform the commission of the resources that the Department of Budget and Fiscal Services would need to implement and enforce a vacant residential property tax.
Okay.
Yeah, no, that's great. I'm glad that question's on there. That
This
came
was
up in
the-
our policy meeting too, so yeah.
Yeah, so I think these questions look great. So there's no movement to actually formally send these over to budget.
I think that's something that I would like to do, but if Commissioner Stormo Gibson was wanting to add questions, or any commissioner right now was wanting to add questions to this list, I think this is our opportunity as a commission to get a longer list together and send that over formally through you, Chair.
Okay. So procedurally, do we want to Commissioner A. White, are we going to add these questions now, or shall the subcommittees, meet in the interim between now and the next meeting to take a look at this and look at adding more questions to it?
Yeah, if there's a formal motion regarding the questions, again, the commission need not approve any sort of questionnaire or formulated questions. I believe Commissioner Pham's just proceeding this so that it's clear amongst everybody what's going on, what his questions are, and he'd like answered. But if the 11 if there's a motion to approve the 11, we can get that locked in. But then if subcommittees meet in the interim between now and the next meeting, we can incorporate additional questions without commission approval to do so, we can just go ahead and add that to the list of 10 or 11. Or again, we can continue a conversation to flesh out questions at the next meeting, but there's no preclusion or inclusion. It's just a matter of once the commission gives me the go ahead to draft it, and it's already drafted, but to get it addressed and set in a manner that's communicated clearly to Budget and Fiscal Services, then we can move forward. I can move forward with these 11. If next week policy committee or another commissioner says, hey, George, I'd like to add on these 3 questions, we can also look into doing that.
Thank you, Commissioner Aide White. I think just in general, we should try to be cognizant of streamlining this process for Budget and Fiscal Services. But in the meantime, I think we should go ahead and let's get started and send some questions over to BFS and get it started, and we can do this on an iterative basis as we go, if that sounds good to everyone.
I think that's a good approach, Chair.
I think, and these are great questions. Thank you very much to the committee members who put those together. Thank you. Any other queries or questions? Yeah, go ahead, go for it.
I was just about to state a motion, but.
Oh, should we make a motion to send to approve the questions and send over to our partners at BFS?
Yes,
Can we add on the other? Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
Oh, please, Commissioner Stormy.
Just wondering, can we add on the questions about the properties that aren't Res A without a homeowner's exemption?
Sure. Yeah. Why don't we do that? Commissioner Stormy Gibson, why don't you work with Commissioner Aide White to make sure that that question is included in this first round over there.
Thank you.
Yeah. Commissioner Pham, did you have something else to add?
Nothing to add. I move to request that the Department of Budget and Fiscal Services inform the Commission of the 11 requests that were submitted today.
And does Commissioner Stormy Gibson wish to amend the motion?
Oh, just to add the other questions on, yeah.
So Commissioner Pham, there is a motion from Commissioner Stormy Gibson to take your motion, but also amend it just to include the referenced questions concerning properties that are not residential A or not within the threshold as discussed in the prior 11 questions. Are you in agreement with that amendment to your motion?
Yes.
Okay. Is there a second to the motion and its amendment?
Second.
Hearing no objections, the motion is approved. Thank you, Commissioner Pham. Commissioners Stormo Gibson or Peters, is there any update from the policy subcommittee?
I guess it already came up a couple of times. Sure, there was a policy meeting on the 15th, and just had a couple pages of notes, but this was just to kind of set a frame for the larger goals of our commission, which has been defined as an equitable and efficient way to pay for services in the city. And then it also references the need to make sure that there's enough resources for essential services. So within that scope of ensuring that the county can pay for its needs and do it in an equitable and efficient way, we discussed maybe defining it further, and then that idea of making sure that the city has the resources needed. That kind of ties into that question about if they were to implement a vacant tax, what would they need to do that? What would be those resources? We did discuss if it's equitable to tax vacant or second homes for the purposes of meeting affordable housing and homelessness needs. There seems to be a connection and a nexus there. As home prices continue to rise, it obviously makes it harder for us to have affordable housing. So, it would seem equitable to use taxing on second and vacant homes as a way to provide those essential needs. If we think of housing as an essential need, which I think makes sense. And then we discussed what is the impact of taxing second properties that have long-term renters? Is it the case that taxes are passed on to the renter or not? It's a subject of economic debate. It depends on if the rent is based on market price or if the rent is based on the cost of the home. So, for example, if the landlord has to provide a new roof, do they pass that cost on to the tenant? Or is their price for rent just set on market price? Some economists would argue that the price is based on market price, not the cost of the actual home. So then we just asked those questions and, we're trying to find more data to answer that. We also wondered about equity of renters versus landlords. So landlords, of course, access many tax advantages and credits. The way that home values are depreciated on a person's income taxes were discussed. And these are benefits, of course, that renters can't access. So is that equitable? And then we talked about, would it make sense to simply have 4 proposed classes of owner-occupied, long-term rented, short-term rented, and then vacant? Would that be a more simple way to classify based on use? And then we also discussed, as mentioned earlier, is it equitable for $1 million or some other amount to be a set threshold where everyone under that is essentially paying an owner-occupied rate, so that a person with 4, $900,000 homes is paying much less tax than a person with $1 $2 million Res A home. Is that an equitable tax? So, yeah, those were the questions that came up. We didn't formalize answers, but I think that these are questions that should be considered if you're looking for equitable and efficient tax policy.
This is Commissioner Peters. I just wanted to elaborate on the 4 proposed classes to the other commissioner. Okay, number 1, owner occupied. Right now, we just have residential and residential A, and just about everybody's in residential, and there's very few properties in residential A. I think that the first class, owner occupied, would be the lowest tax rate. Right now, it's the 0.35% residential. It would be easy for real property tax administrators to look at that, because basically now that class would only include people with the $100,000 exemption or the $140,000 exemption. In other words, you have to occupy the house to be in that class. Okay. Long-term rented would be other properties, and as a starting point, we could say maybe the residential A rate of 0.45%. Okay, and we wanted that to be almost as low as the owner-occupied rate, because long-term rent, this is where most of our renters gonna fall into. Now, the argument that's gonna come up is, well, if we raise the tax a little on them, they're gonna pass it on and make it more expensive for the renters. But that's going back to question 2, where is it the market that determines the rent, or is it the cost? And I believe it's not going to be passed on. The reason is most people who buy rental properties. First, they buy their own home. And then after that, what they'll do is they'll buy a second home, find a renter. It's a good way to build wealth. Okay. So the advantage on that second home is that you get to deduct all the expenses. Okay. If you're in the owner-occupied home, you only get to deduct your mortgage interest and your property tax. Okay. Everything else comes out of your household budget. Okay. Once you get that second home and you start renting it out, now you get to deduct mortgage interest, real property tax. If it's a condo, you get to deduct your maintenance fees, any repairs, anything that for the upkeep of that property, you get to deduct. And most importantly, you get to take depreciation expense on that property. Okay, so the reason everybody likes to do this is because you generate a huge tax loss, because the depreciation is going to add so much expense that you're going to generate a tax loss. Now you claim that, you file that on Schedule E, and then of course, now you get a big loss, you get a big tax refund, and that tax refund from both federal and state offset any negative cash flow that might come out while you're renting out that property. Okay, so there is an advantage to those people, and that's why I think this is more fair. That's a slightly higher rate. We don't have to decide what that rate is today, but I think people who own a second or third or fourth property can afford to pay a slightly higher rate than the people who have just one property. Okay, then we go to 3, which is for short-term rentals. So I think in our discussions, it's been 180 days, to be considered short-term rental. This would be the B&Bs, this would be the vacation units. Okay, now they could be taxed at a slightly higher rate. I think right now there's a B&B rate of 0.65%. Again, that's a starting point. So they would be taxed at a slightly higher rate than the long-term rentals. And of course, the last one is the vacant tax. I think the starting point, that tax doesn't exist yet, but I think in most of the research we've done to date, starts at probably 1.00% or even higher. Again, I think if we did these 4 classes, it would kind of address a lot of the problems with the status quo. So anyway, I hope that kind of clarifies what those 4 proposed classes are. Now, of course, if we're interested in this, it's kind of going to affect what we're already asking, the questions we're already submitting, because those bills that are already in there are going to be irrelevant, because now we're not going to have residential A and stuff like that. So again, not to complicate things, but if we're interested in something like this, we might have to go back to square one, because all those other questions, like I say, would be irrelevant.
Thank you, Commissioner Peters. Any questions for Commissioner Peters or Commissioner Stormo Gibson? I'll just add, I was an attendee at the policy subcommittee meeting, and just and it was a great discussion. And just one other thing that I'll add is that really the policy committee is also about looking at those higher level goals of equity and efficiency, and just determining, one, defining what that is in a little bit more detail, but also assuring that those goals and looking at, assessing whether those goals are indeed being met, and if not, what it's going to take from a policy and sort of structural standpoint to serve those needs. So it's sort of taking a look at the whole of the property tax code, and whether that's serving those larger goals of equity and efficiency. And equity is indeed just as important as efficiency. So thank you, commissioners. Anyone from the valuation, so Vice Chair Wong is not with us today. Who are any members from the valuation subcommittee that would like to provide a report of their current work?
I don't think we met.
Yeah, Chair Mould, I believe, as far as my knowledge is concerned, and Commissioner Bean may have other input, but I do not believe that the valuation subcommittee has had any further meetings unless Commissioner Bean or Commissioner Stormo Gibson have anything to add. But I do not believe they have any additional information from the last meeting.
Thank you, Commissioner Aide White. I'm noticing Commissioner Bean is timing out. Are you able to hear us, Commissioner Bean?
Oh,
Okay. Commissioner Stormo Gibson?
and Commissioner Bean's video appears to be back. Can you hear us, Commissioner Bean?
Well, given that the information that there was not a meeting since the last meeting, I think we can move on to, unless Commissioner Bean is now coming back on and wants to say something. She's looking, from my computer, she looks timed out right now, or.
I think there's something wrong with her connection, I think,
Yeah.
internet connection.
So we'll move on to, for the time being, to the next. Commissioner Pham, is there any update from the Credits and Exemptions Subcommittee?
Yes, thank you, Chair. We did not have a meeting. Instead, the agenda items for today's meeting are coming from just a list of things that have come up either through our testimony or by looking at previous commission reports. And I emailed it and CC'd our chair and commission aide whenever I sent that to Commissioner Wong. So those topics for discussion that are listed on the agenda today are coming out of that email. So just a summary of the things that have come up in it. It seems like this subcommittee will probably need a meeting, and we'll be discussing some of these issues. I'm not sure what Commissioner Wong has in mind in terms of other items, but I'm going to summarize the ones that I presented to him. The first one was just to make sure that on the issue of vacant residential properties, that we ask ourselves the questions within the context of this subcommittee, what exemptions or credits might be applied to that property tax class. So if we're looking at the overall rules, right now there's the Bill 76 that seems to be in the court of rates and classifications, and the overall ideas with the policy, but maybe there would be certain provisions that would be appropriate to exempt certain vacant residential properties, such as things that may be unimproved or dilapidated, things like that. The next issue is a homeowner's exemption. There was a written testifier at the last meeting that referred to property tax credit for low income, not owing any other property, just let us pay the 3%. I believe this is in reference to the revised ordinances section 8-13.2. And that's something that we'll want to look closer into. But as I understand that ordinance, it is essentially putting a cap on the property taxes owed whenever you are low income. There was also testimony submitted to today's meeting, written testimony that makes reference to this. Again, not referencing that specific section, but it's something that hopefully we'll be able to talk about more deeply and explore. The other issues include current legislation, pending legislation with Bill 3 in 2021. That's acquisition by death of property owner to offer some relief. The credit union exemption, which was a recommendation from the previous commission, that is pending legislation as Bill 11 from 2020. So that's something that we'd like to perhaps apply some urgency to. The next one is the historic residential exemption. Again, that was a recommendation from the previous commission, and there is a bill, Bill 12 from 2020. We'd like to discuss applying some urgency to that, make another recommendation to move things along. The same applies for Bill 30 as it relates to for-profit childcare. And there was also an accessory dwelling unit exemption that was discussed, but no particular recommendation was made. Instead, it was a recommendation to this commission to review this more closely. So that is something that whenever Commissioner Wong and I have a chance to meet as a subcommittee, that we, at least I intend to bring up as an issue for us to look into detail. Another thing that came up is after joining the commission, I asked around about certain issues, and one thing that came to my attention from an owner and operator of low-income rental housing is that the way that they file their property taxes in Kauai County versus Honolulu County is different in regards to their exemption. So on Hawaii, they file it once and it is tied to the state regulated agreement for their low income rentals. So they don't have to file it again for the period of their affordability. Whereas in Honolulu County, they apparently have to reapply every year for their exemption. And nothing about their situation has changed because they are in fact regulated by the state or by the federal government. So we wanted to look into that and see if we could maybe compare the procedures between our two counties and see if maybe this is something that would actually benefit the Department of Budget and Fiscal Services if it's one less thing that the department has to worry about, especially because we are aware that there are other counties in the state that operate this way. Finally, there's the charitable purposes exemption that has been brought up as well during testimony. So a deep dive into that and some recommendations may be in order by this commission, but that is all that I flagged based on our testimony and based on the current legislation and previous commission's report.
Commissioner Pham, are you also taking Ms. Iwasa's recommendation on the charitable purposes to kind of really tighten up the definition of that? Like charitable purposes?
Yes, that is something that I'm just acknowledging that whenever we meet as a subcommittee, that we'll pay close attention to this and look through all the wording line by line to help clean that up.
And Commissioner Stormo Gibson, I believe, had her hand raised, Chair.
Oh, I'm glad you brought up that requirement for the affordable housing projects. I believe those are the ones paid for with low income housing tax credits, right?
That's correct.
Yeah, so those are definitely heavily monitored by the Hawaii Housing Finance and Development Corporation, also known as HHFDC. And they have 60-year affordability periods, any of the new projects going up. The federal limit is 15 years, but in Hawaii now the standard is a 60-year affordability period. So it does seem a bit redundant to have to apply every year for that exemption. I'm glad that was flagged because that just seems like unnecessary paperwork.
Thank you. Any other questions from commissioners for Commissioner Pham or other members of the Credits and Exemption Subcommittee? Hearing none, I would like to move on to our discussion. And I would like to open the floor to discuss invitations or subject matter experts or testifiers for upcoming meetings or other individuals' ultimate work product. Perhaps from each of the subcommittee's vantage point, I'll just ask subcommittees to, when they do meet, we should start thinking about, putting down a list of names to start inviting for testimony to the broader commission. With that, I'll open the floor up to discussion. Does anyone want to, have anything to say about potential subject matter experts to inform our decisions that they would like us to send invitations to?
Commissioner
that,
Stormo Gibson.
I think this came up last time, actually, with Commissioner Wong, which is Maui is in the process of implementing a long-term rental category in their tax code. And it could be good to talk to somebody there about how they're implementing that. And
Great,
yeah. Because again, the connection is that whether or not we do a long-term renter category, to do a vacant home tax, you need to verify if it's not vacant, right? And so the idea is what are they requiring to verify that, and how many resources do they think that's going to require? Because it's essentially the same question as implementing a vacancy tax, and how do you do that, and what resources does it take? Oh, we lost. We got some triangles. Oh, Pham is back. Now we lost Chair Mold and Commissioner Bean.
Uh-oh.
Oh.
Yeah, I mean, where's our chair? Chair Mold, are you still with us? Can I say something, Commissioner Aide? Just following up on what Commissioner Gibson was saying, I would also be very interested really on the empty home tax, because so far I think we only heard one testimony about the empty home tax, and that was from a church, I think, in our last meeting. So of course I understand that our purpose is basically somehow to build up some funds to help affordable homes. But I would like to know more about the different issues that will be surrounding it, like enforcement, for example, which is a big one, and things like that. So if we can get the Maui, thinking about it, if we can get somebody from Maui to give us some background on what they're doing over there, I think that would be a big help.
Yeah, or even somebody from Vancouver, perhaps.
Yeah. So since we can do that virtually, right? You don't have to fly over to
Yeah.
Hawaii. So yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Commissioner Stormo Gibson, I believe you're referring to possibly some of the outreach that Miss Ellen Carson did regarding other jurisdictions. Honing in though on your request, is there anybody based on your experience as far as for me to facilitate because there is a body that coordinates amongst all 4 councils called the State Association of Counties. That may not necessarily be our route, but is there anybody specific within Maui that we should be looking to reach out to? And certain council members have relationships with other council members, so we can, I don't anticipate we would have difficulty getting whoever you want, but if there's somebody specific that you believe or some position that would have the most input or ability to opine on things, who is it that we should be pursuing?
I'm not sure. I mean, of course, their real property assessment division, that would make sense. And then I am not sure, like, yeah, I'm unsure which council member exactly is, pushing on that bill, but they do have something in place right now that is requiring folks to submit and prove they are long-term, because they just created that category. And so you have to prove if you're in that category, right? So yeah, I would start with their real property tax.
And possibly following up with a council member who may have had the most involvement, and
In that
likely
bill,
they
yeah.
would open the door to who else might have information. Okay.
Do we have access to their testimony, the written testimony
Yes.
for that bill?
Yes, and I can pull that
Perhaps
together.
we can find subject matter experts from that list as well. And just I will be reaching out to Vancouver. We've actually Ellen Carson, the testifier from our last meeting from the Church of the Crossroads, has already reached out to Vancouver and provided us with that information that was sent out today, that will be posted for public view as well. But yeah, that was, we will, it went out to, it was about a bunch of different jurisdictions. So we'll be looking to reach out to at least a few of those jurisdictions about their empty homes taxes that they implemented.
To the, I have in Chair of Mold, this is Commissioner Legal. I know, thank you for sending us those different reports from, what's your name? I forgot.
Ellen Carson.
Yeah, Ellen Carson, thank you. Do we have anybody like with a different, I'm saying is a different approach, not so much in opposition, but a different take into this empty tax home so that we have a better understanding? If we only gonna get like those in favor, okay, this is the benefits of this, but I would like to get like a really good sample of those who are for it and those who are against it or have experience against it and things like that, so we can really be informed when we make a decision on this one. If we can find somebody who is sort of a different take on this empty home tax,
Commissioner Legal, I'll just say it's a pretty new concept. So there's, there was a bill a couple of years ago, and maybe some of the testifiers on that bill will pop up as potential counter reviews. But yeah, we'll certainly look for all sorts of perspectives. I mean, I would also like to see a perspective from the real estate industry, perspective from the economics field and the affordable housing field, and I think a lot of that was vetted in the Vancouver proceeding, but we'll do some research on that.
Okay. This might not be a fair question to Commissioner Aid White. Do you hear any chatter from our council members about this empty tax, or are they discussing it? Are they talking about it? I'm not trying to say if you're eavesdropping in their conversation, but
Yeah, I cannot discuss what the council members discuss with our office or with me personally, but I can share that they have publicly discussed certain matters, and there have been public expressions of interest. So it is definitely an area that I believe the council in general is interested in the advisory commission's input and thoughts on. One other side comment, I can pull together a list of prior individuals that have come before the commission to provide input, but one individual that seems to be consistent is also a perspective that is given at the legislature is I believe the Tax Foundation of Hawaii, Mr. Yamachika does provide one aspect of consideration. I believe Appleseed also has testified on various issues regarding tax policies. So those types of entities, if the commissioners are interested, I believe we have connections to both of those, not necessarily opposing viewpoints, but definitely well-researched and thought through viewpoints.
Yeah, I'll be interested with the Tax Foundation.
I'd like to add to the discussion about getting additional expert testimony on the vacant homes issue. We have that UCLA study that was Mayor's Message 87 from 2020. And that was presented to the commission already, and I've read through that. I'm just wondering for the other commissioners, what else do you really need at this point after going through that study? Because I'm afraid that we're going to just keep talking about it and not actually provide a recommendation. To me, that study has plenty of information, and at this point, it's really just up for the community to debate, and for this commission to help steer that debate a bit. But I think that study provides plenty for us to go off of at this point.
Yeah, I just thought
And
that
it
there
was
was
a
a
study
lot of
specifically about Honolulu.
yeah, I just thought that that's why I think it was postponed from last year or 2 years ago or something. It was delayed. There's just so much, I think, different school of thoughts on it. Maybe part of it is logical, some of it are emotional, whatever. And as Chair Moll was saying, this is like a new issue, sort of a new issue that we're turning our foot on. And I know we have so many study out there, but and we can never, I don't think we can never get a perfect answer to these things, but we just want to be more equitable, as we say, equitable and fair to everybody. And so that's what I'm saying.
I mean, I could say that in Maui, I know some of the discussions had been around how can you enforce it, and would it be easy for somebody to cheat and just pretend like, oh yeah, my brother's living there and here's my, so it seemed like there were definitely concerns that had to be worked out on the enforcement side.
If we have this,
yeah.
I'm sorry, Commissioner Gibson, but I was going to ask, George White, who would normally enforce this? The BFS, or who would enforce this law if we have an empty tax? If it passes?
I think it's the same division that enforces the homeowner's exemption.
That is without verifying with the real property tax administrator. Based on his testimony last meeting, I believe they have their own potential enforcement arm of some sort or compliance arm. He indicated he needed more, but I do not have personal knowledge of any enforcement entity for BFS related matters that are outside of either BFS or specifically the Real Property Administration Division.
Yeah. Because we have so many, I think we have so many good laws right now, but it's short of enforcement. Like the Commissioner Peter talks about the short term. Now the DPP is trying to increase from 3 months to 180 days, And again, one of the opposition is we already have laws that is existing. We need to enforce them, So it comes down to enforcement a lot of times. there are good laws, but if they're not enforced, nothing's going to happen, you know.
Yeah, I think the role of our commission is to make recommendations, and if proper enforcement is part of that recommendation. I mean, part of the, I think the reason for the policy committee to ask the question of, you know, what are the goals of the commission, and does the city have the resources to enforce and to administer and to enact the law? I think that's exactly one of the reasons for that question. And, you know, we should also be asking, well, if it's not there, then what needs to be there, right, to do that, to enforce. So I think we should be looking at it from that angle as well.
Yes.
And, you know, there are ideas out there where it's basically self-certification. I mean, the same way you certify that you're living in your home in a homeowner's exemption, right? I mean, who enforces the homeowner's exemption? RPAD does. And, you know, so I think there's different ways to look at this. And so I think we should very much be looking at all options on the table. Any others? Sorry, I may have cut off the discussion a little too early on this. Is there any other questions or comments on this issue? Not just of this. I mean, we sort of veered into the discussion of the empty homes tax from looking for subject matter experts. Are there any other comments or questions
about anything else, or?
Yeah, I think if we're going to have a discussion, you know, maybe the way to go is, you know, the policy committee, I believe, is looking at the empty homes tax. Perhaps, you know, if you have questions, and maybe the rates and classifications committee is looking at it as well. I think if you have questions that you want posed and looked at, please maybe put an email down to the commissioners, you know, in those subcommittees or the whole commission, and we can start addressing the questions that you have, Commissioner Legal.
Yeah.
In the meantime, you know, it's noted, but we'll look for a broad perspective of views to testify before the commission.
And that'll be good. Thank you so much, Chair.
So I have a question. This is Commissioner Pham. Considering we only have 2 months left before it's time to submit our final report, what do we think is going to happen if we don't get those expert testifiers? Are we still prepared to make a recommendation using the knowledge that we currently have, or is it really dependent on us having these expert witnesses?
Is that December thing? Is that set in stone? Final report?
The December, so we have leeway to go farther than December. That said, I do think, you know, I would like this commission to make a concerted effort to reach conclusions about recommendations, including the empty homes tax, the vacancy tax for consideration. So it's, you know, given that it's been on, you know, the policy and docket at City Council for a couple of years now, I think there's plenty of record for us to go have a crack at it. Now, if for some reason, you know, Commissioner has a different viewpoint, this is certainly the forum to discuss that.
I would just, Commissioner Pham, I appreciate you kind of naming the timeline and saying, okay, you know, how do we fit this in within the next 2 months? And I would propose that if people are able to talk to some experts, maybe from Vancouver or other places, and get at least email testimony, or even if they can't come at our designated time, if they can submit some kind of written testimony, that could be used as well. Because sometimes with the time differences and whatnot, they may or may not be able to show up in person, but at least if they could provide written comments.
In addition, Commissioners Thermal Gibson and Chair, there is always the opportunity that we need not box any potential subject matter expert or individual that you wish to talk to the committee. We need not box them into our schedule of meetings. We also could schedule just a straight up meeting just for them via WebEx or via Zoom, however it might be. We would agendize it. But as long as we have 4 commissioners able to be present, then we could have a date that works for them, and it would be a public meeting. We would agendize it, but again, we could have a meeting just for them, not necessarily that they have to fit into our schedule of meetings. So that is always an option as well.
Thank you. That's good to know.
Mr. Chair, can I ask Ms. Iwasa something? Is that proper?
Sure, why not? Go ahead.
I was just gonna, because she was a past member or commissioner of this commission. If she dealt with this, she seems to be knowledgeable about this empty home tax. If she
Or vacancy tax.
Vacancy tax.
Vacant homes tax. Yeah.
Vacant home tax. If they dealt with this in depth during her time with the commission.
Thank you. This is Natalie Wassa. I don't recall any specific discussions on this. I do remember that there was a bill that was brought up at City Council and it kind of just quietly died.
Yeah, that's what we're talking about, I think. That was during the time of Ikaika Anderson, yeah.
Yes.
Thank you. I don't want to put you in the spot, but thank you so much. Yeah.
Sure, you're welcome.
There was public testimony hearing that bill.
Yes.
Any other comments?
Well, if is it then the policy committee and then also the rates committee that would, we should communicate maybe about who's approaching who. So for example, I can be in touch with Commissioner White about the Maui people, but if someone else wants to reach out to Vancouver folks, I used to live in Oakland, California, happy to reach out to Oakland. If people have information that could be helpful for us.
That'd be great. I would say, go ahead and reach out to Oakland. I will reach out to Vancouver, unless someone else wants to bring them in.
Mr. Chair, right. Can I reach out from our local real estate industry here as well, since you mentioned about it?
Of course.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks.
So to confirm, Commissioner Legal, I just have a list of some of the topic areas, but real estate industry is what you are speaking to and going to help reach out for as far as somebody to speak.
That's right. Yeah.
Correct.
I will.
And we have Appleseed represented here. Is there a specific subject matter expert from Appleseed, or maybe UHERO? I think there's someone at UHERO that I will bring in. That's the University of Hawaii Economic Research Organization, who is out there, who I will reach out to.
Are you talking about Phil Garbodine?
Yes, that's what I'm talking about. Yeah.
Yeah, that would be good.
Yeah.
There is another individual, and I'm not, again, this is Commissioner White. I'm not clear on his, the expanse of his domain, but he has come before the council a couple times, largely related just to broad economic policies, and that would be, I believe he's a noted doctorate in economist, Paul Brubaker.
Yeah, sure.
But I don't know his association with UHERO or whatnot, but he does have interesting takes on things, and the council has had him before to discuss various matters. So that's another name out there, but I believe his area is economics.
That would be great. I think that getting Paul Brubaker to testify before us would be great. Let's put an invite out to him as well.
He could have a take on if a tax is passed on to a renter or not, from an economist standpoint.
Yep. So, do we have, Commission Aide White, are you gonna put a list out for, are you gonna put this in the notes, in the meeting notes, and assign the different categories to us, or?
I think that may, Chair, I defer to you and what you tell me to do, but I believe I can put together some sort of draft of exactly this conversation, and we can circulate it amongst the commission members regarding these subject areas and potential names or potential people. And as long as we have a specific individual on the commission that's reaching out, or if it's on through the council services reach out, we can do that, but we just want to make clear who's reaching out to who, and this needs to move. I think, as has been pointed out, that our calendar is tight and we need to move this quickly. So in the next couple of days, I will generate that list for the commission to work through, and we'll have a working discussion of getting ideally these people lined up, maybe in a slam bam meeting where we just have them all come in, or we have different meetings, whatever the commission wishes. But the key thing is to make contact and get as much notice ahead to them so that we can hopefully lock them in to join us for a little bit to share their knowledge.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Aide White. So I'm trying to pull up the agenda. So next on our agenda, I think we should move on. We're about 6 minutes away from 4 o'clock. Commissioner Aide White, are we able to go beyond 4 o'clock? Or should we go beyond 4 o'clock to make sure we get through all of these agenda items, or do we table some agenda items for next meeting?
I believe we're close to finished. As far as the second agenda item regarding status of prior recommendations, we're still working on putting that together and being able to present it to the commission in a formal way. So we can go ahead and defer that matter to next meeting, and all the other matters I believe are procedural.
Great, thank you, Commissioner Aide White. Members, are there any announcements? And please keep in mind the time. But if any members have announcements, the floor is open for announcements. Hearing none, we're moving on to the scheduling of the next meeting. Of course, subcommittees are welcome to meet as they please. The only thing that I request is that each subcommittee provide a brief summary report of any meeting that takes place at the next meeting of the full commission. With that said, I'd like to open the floor to discussion about the next meeting of the commission. When would be a good date for the next meeting of the commission? Shall we go for 3 weeks from, in 3 weeks? Let me pull up my calendar real quick.
3 weeks from today.
So 3 weeks from today would be October 18th. So does Monday, October 18th, Tuesday, October 19th, or Wednesday, October 20th work best for anyone?
I cannot
Wednesday,
do,
October
I cannot
28th
do
works
18
best
and
for me.
20, so. I can do 22, October 22 at 2 o'clock.
Commissioner Bean?
I just have a lot of stuff happening between the 11th and the 19th, but outside of that, I'm fairly open.
So,
it's-
Commissioner Legal, you can only, you can only do Friday, October 22nd? Is that what I'm hearing?
22nd, but Commissioner Bean cannot do 19, right? So
Right. So how about Wednesday, the 20th?
I could probably do the 19th, actually.
If I can pause the conversation just to bring to the commission's attention that October 19th, 20th, and 21st are committee meeting dates for the council. Now, some committees may or may not meet, but we assume that they will be meeting. So my recommendation would be that it be either October 18th or October 22nd. I cannot necessarily guarantee that one of the afternoon committees will not go long. But it could be, you could possibly set a meeting for 4 o'clock or sometime thereafter on 19, 20, or 21, but 18 and 22 of October are wide open. And then the following week, 25, 27, 28, 29 are wide open as well. And as well as the week before is wide open. So if you wanted the 15th or 14th,
so
but 19, 20, 21
I can do
are booked.
19. I can do 19 and 22nd.
So why don't how does the 22nd work for other commission members?
22nd.
You have 2 thumbs up from Commissioner Peters and Commissioner Stormo Gibson.
And a thumb up from Commissioner Bean. Commissioner Pham, did I see a thumbs up from you?
October
No.
22nd.
Friday,
at 2
October
o'clock.
22nd at 2 p.m.
2 p.m.
Yes. That works.
Okay.
All right. Absent objection, the next meeting of the commission will be on October 22nd, Friday, October 22nd at 2 p.m.
Noted.
There being no further business today, is there a motion to adjourn?
So move.
Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Commissioner Bean, I think. There being no objections, this meeting is adjourned.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.